After binging what I can say was all of Pokemon Generation 4, here comes Pokemon Generation 5, the generation that I remember actively waiting to learn more about as the year went on. As I stressed in my Platinum review, I started my Pokemon journey officially back in 2010, having all the games I could muster in my little handy dandy notebook, Nintendo DS. That was all I remember playing back in the day, that and of course some Sonic, and no doubt one of the greatest things to ever come out of my childhood before the era of smartphones and social media came into being. I remember hearing all kinds of different things from friends of mine around this time, just talking about this brand new up and coming Pokemon game that was going to completely change everything we know about the franchise with brand new Pokemon in the bunch, which obviously that ended up being Pokemon Black and White. Listen, I scoured through the ends of the earth learning about this through the Cerebi website, seeing what they were leaking through the Kokoro magazines. God, remember those? How the starter Pokemon would look like and what the region was gonna be. This was legit all 10-year-old me was thinking about, and it wasn't gonna stop there. I feel like this feeling of wanting to learn more about a Pokemon game as time went on is kind of lost nowadays with the amount of rumors and leaks and just Twitter being Twitter, but back then it was really a change of pace to wanting to learn more about this, especially with already the amount of content we had with Pokemon prior to Generation 5's release. Pokemon Generation 5 in retrospect was feeling like it was gonna be its own thing, seemingly removing itself from the basis of the previous mainline titles. Not to say that those games didn't have their own foundations, seeing new Pokemon in each generation as well as how the regions interact with the player certainly piqued the interest of those who grew up with it since the mid-90s. But it seemed that for Gen 5, it was just gonna be like a soft reboot of sorts. With a new set of 150 exclusive Pokemon and completely reworking the graphics and gameplay design, Gen 5 was shifting the franchise into the modern era that we're more accustomed to seeing nowadays in terms of presentation and design. This was also the one and only generation I remember seeing having a duology, with Pokemon Black and White releasing in spring of 2011 and Black 2 and White 2 releasing in summer of 2012. Yeah, no definitive edition this time, which I guess speaks volumes to the work ethic Game Freak had regarding this one, in a good way I should stress. You could argue with the case of the third definitive edition that it's done to kind of typically fix the issues the other versions have and just add more content on top of that, as we've seen with Emerald and Platinum. But here with Generation 5, you honestly get a really good feeling the moment you boot up the game to the moment the credits roll. Now, for logistical reasons, I'm only going to be covering part 1 today and do part 2 separately, since at the end of the day, these are still RPGs. These guys take a lot of time to even play, so imagine covering both of them in one video. For this revisit, I went ahead and played Pokemon Black since I already own a copy of White and wanted to compare some of the differences the two have, and for part 2, I'll play Pokemon White 2 to even things out. But to go back to how I saw these as a kid, I feel like this was like the starting point to something bigger, at least compared to my experiences with Sinnoh and Johto back with Platinum and Heart Gold Soul Silver. Starting with the Unova region, the region for this game, well, rather than taking roots from Japanese settings and locales, Game Freak decided that the foundation they wanted for this game was to be in America! Fuck yeah, brother! Land of the free, home of the brave. We got the greatest skyline in the world. We got the sexiest women in the world. We got the best Pokemon battles and even some sports teams and stadiums. That's Unova, baby, for you. Oh yeah! Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh, Woo. I don't know what, wow. Anyway, yeah, we're in America here, folks, and already as I'm replaying, it definitely feels right at home. Not to dismiss how I felt with Sinnoh when I revisited Platinum, or how I felt with Emerald, there was something about this region that just caught my eye minute 1 as a kid, and even now that I can't describe it in proper words. Like how realistic this pigeon fighting a raccoon is in the streets of New York. It oozes that vibe of Americana and presents all those features you normally associate with the American lifestyle. From large, robust metropolitan areas, to suburbs that feel all nice and cozy to walk around in, to apartment complexes and sports stadiums that I'm kinda surprised that are empty every time I walk in them. We even have the Pokemon equivalent to Broadway and amusement parks. It all speaks America in a way that feels great to explore even almost 13 years later. That said, we still have the usual Pokemon-esque features that are typical of a Pokemon game, like the mythical Dragonspiral Tower you visit later on. There's also the usual Ghost Tower, here renamed as the Celestial Tower, and surprisingly no cycling road. I thought there was gonna be one here. What's cool about Generation 5 is also the leap in quality compared to the previous generations, fully fleshing out the vision of what Pokemon can achieve on the Nintendo DS. And I will say this now, this is what I absolutely love the most about Pokemon Black and White. Hell, the whole duology really. While Generation 4 was the basis, by now the folks at Game Freak knew what they were cooking with. The way the camera angles are dynamic as you explore through cities and routes, constantly panning in and out or even twirling the player just expresses the idea that some areas are truly larger than life. I just love exploring through Castelia City and how wide the camera pans out, showing that this is indeed a metropolitan cityscape littered with so many people passing by you doing their own little thing while you're on and about in your own little adventure. Or how as you're passing through the Skyarrow bridge. Man, I always love this visual as it speaks volumes to the artistic expression Unova is showing off in terms of both new and older players. That and the music, oh, it's so gorgeous at first listen, and I love how great it sounds as you move along on your travels. In the Pokemon battles against the gym leader specifically, man, you see this a lot where they're on their last stand and the music just shifts suddenly into this "you got this" moment as you're just inches away from victory. God, I love this so much. There is something about Unova as a region that explores the melting pot of ideas that makes the whole adventure even more enjoyable looking back. Again, it's not to say that the other regions didn't do all that, you know, God bless Sinnoh for all it has done for me regardless of what I'm saying here, but Pokemon Black and White just does a way better job overall. We have a whole lot to cover for this generation of Pokemon here, and I will say to start things off officially, let's talk about the story of Pokemon Black and White, because if there's one thing about Generation 5 is that the story is actually integral to the whole experience. Our story here starts with either Hilbert or Hilda, our protagonists for this game. Low-key, I prefer their Japanese names, Toya and Toko, because honestly it just sounds better. They're also older looking this time, appearing to be at least 14 or 15 years old instead of the usual 10-11 age range that you had previously. Though hindsight is always 20/20, and I like to believe that we've always been playing as teenagers this whole time, but here is a lot more obvious. Otherwise, this line right here wouldn't make any sense. As usual, the journey is the same as you start your days as a Pokemon trainer in Nuevema town, where Professor Juniper drops off your starter Pokemon to choose and obviously go through the motions. For this adventure, I went ahead with Tepig to increase the fire rep for my Pokemon review marathon. You know, back when I played Generation 5 initially, I did choose Oshawott for my adventures, and I think I might say as a heads up here, I'm probably going to be leaning towards that route for Black 2 and White 2. I'm so sorry, Snivy fans, but it is what it is. Alongside this journey are your best friends Cheren and Bianca, your rivals for this game who do a way better job at what May and Wally did back in Generation 3. A much better duo considering that they are more involved with the plot this time. With Bianca learning to travel and enjoy the presence of being with Pokemon, while Cheren, like any other rival we face, wants to become strong enough to face the Pokemon League. Again, it's the regular motions of a Pokemon game as per usual. You get your starter, you battle your rivals, get the Pokedex from the professor, and boom, you're already on your way towards becoming the champion. Yeah, it's that fast with the tutorials. Not much later, you even encounter the big bad for this game, Team Plasma, who swears to protect Pokemon and liberate them from their so-called suffering, all led by this not so obvious but pretty obvious bad guy named Ghetsis. In short, they're PETA, and my god, if this didn't scream America to me, I don't know what is with the level of entitlement these people have in telling me what I can and cannot do. Oh, you think I should set my Pokemon free? Nah, bitch! It's pretty ironic too, these guys use Pokemon to further their goals, but given how already stupid they are in comparison to the other villainous teams we face, it makes sense in the grand scheme of things. But I do like these guys though, especially with the whole theme of "Are Pokemon happy?" which was never really a topic that was explored in the previous games, outside of, at least from what I remember, Generation 2 with Silver. We just assumed that they were always happy to be our buddies, and while it's not different here, the theme just sort of gets thrown in your face all the time, making you question your decisions as you're shuffling through the PC box, you know, like, do I really want this Pokemon with me, or do I want that Pokemon with me? Oh damn, they got me thinking, the bastards! Though intriguing, still, the topic in question doesn't go too far beyond that. This is a child's RPG and not a Final Fantasy game after all. I don't think Pokemon will ever achieve achieve that sort of thing even with the newer games. But it does show merit in the storytelling Gen 5 wanted to emphasize, and we see that theme play itself out as we continue through the adventure. Team Plasma in their eyes are essentially liberating Pokemon, and while they do almost a pretty bad job at convincing the public, they do raise questions about how much Pokemon mean to us, since not everyone views them as battle buddies but just an overall companion to be around. This is further stressed by the encounters of a rather aloof character by the name of N. I like to consider him as our true rival here, as N really makes up for a compelling character because he embodies a lot of what Team Plasma so-called preaches, acting as our antithesis to our goals and aspirations. N also is very sympathetic towards Pokemon, mainly due to his royal upbringing, and doesn't have a problem with spouting his ideals. He sees things as morally gray, and he travels the region to spread his beliefs while searching for the legendary Pokemon Zekrom or Reshiram, all to achieve his goals as well as obtain the title of champion to show that he really means business. Now, I wasn't aware that becoming champion is somehow the equivalent of being the fucking president, but I can understand where he's getting at. He's not antagonistic, but he's dead set on his ideals and isn't narrow-minded. He just has a different perspective and was raised with that viewpoint thanks to his father Ghetsis, who is his father, right? Like, was that ever confirmed? Well, whatever. Ghetsis obviously runs the show with Team Plasma, clearly taking the Oscar for the most obvious bad guy out there. Look at his design alone, and I hope he's wearing some clothes underneath that weird poncho of his. Revealed to be the main villain early on, Ghetsis uses N as a puppet in his schemes as he wants to use the legendary Pokemon and those that were released in order to conquer the world. Now, that is a villain I absolutely fuck with because he cares about the end result, manipulating Team Plasma to do his bidding and warps the message to achieve his goals. I just wish this reveal wasn't so early on, you know, like seeing how he has a stronghold on the Plasma members whenever they screw up, and it becomes a matter of beating Ghetsis that it is beating Team Plasma. But none of this somehow feels like a secondary plot point, as now this all ties into your quest of becoming a Pokemon trainer. As usual, you're tasked by the Pokemon professor to go out there and explore the region to complete the Pokedex, collect the gym badges, and go through the usual motions. But then early on, as you learn about N's ideals and wanting to be a Pokemon champion himself, then the Pokemon Gym Challenge has more incentive, as now you want to stop N as well as Team Plasma. This makes it a race to the finish line, and along the way Team Plasma does their usual routine of villainy in order to stop you, but it doesn't feel as erratic as it did previously. They're more organized and discreet, and whenever they show up, it's not you dealing with the threat, but also your friends and even the gym leaders who are within the area. And the gym leaders in this game, god, I absolutely love them, but I gotta wonder about the amount of lawsuits these fuckers are swimming in. No shit, the gyms themselves are like liabilities waiting for something to happen, like this right here. How the hell am I not dead after slamming my face to the wall from a cannon? That said, I love their integration because they act as a secondary mentor figure compared to just glorified mayors waiting for a child to beat their asses. Well, okay, except for Drayden, because he actually is the mayor of Opposite City, and this made me laugh because it was like Pokemon was suddenly becoming self-aware. But again, they're now part of the adventure, helping us beat Team Plasma while also teaching us a thing or two about becoming a Pokemon trainer. More personality into the mix, and each of them does their best to thwart Team Plasma because they too have a stake in the game, you could say, and they even help build character development with both Cheren and Bianca. As I said earlier, these two are our rivals for this generation, more so Cheren than Bianca really. Bianca is more about traveling the region and having Pokemon as her companions, something that her dad later on in the adventure doesn't want her doing for the sole purpose of her being too young to do so, which I have to say is pretty ironic and funny because when the hell were parents so involved in the lives of their children suddenly in a Pokemon game, no less? That's right, never. But I like the attempt to at least make us understand that yeah, Pokemon isn't as easy as it sounds. In a way, Bianca serves her role as a supporting character that you happen to face from time to time, and through her, we see how much building a relationship with Pokemon means as we move along on our journey. She tries her best to be as strong as Cheren and the player, but it's not really her overall focus. Cheren, on the other hand, serves more of the traditional rival role. He means well and wants to be strong, and I like how the gym leaders and other supporting characters help him understand what his dreams are as he travels along collecting Pokemon and the such. But for me, I like to view him as the Ishida of Pokemon, as notwithstanding design alone, he wants to prove to be the stronger of the two, but he isn't obnoxious about it all the same. Or at least not towards you anyway. Though we are the same plank of wood as we are in these games, it's nice to see how things are going through the lens of our friends here, as these guys pop up from time to time to see how we are doing, making their interactions all the more enjoyable. The same can even be said with Professor Juniper, who goddamn man, for a very first female Pokemon professor that honest to god deserves way more fan art because she's sorely lacking in that department. She too too is a major cornerstone in the adventure, ensuring you have the resources you need while also helping out your friends in their research, acting as both a mentor and mother figure as we continue on. While I can talk more about N any other day of the week, what I find a bit confusing is the involvement of Ghetsis. Don't get me wrong, Ghetsis is a perfect villain, for a Pokemon game at least, but remove him for a second and you'll see that you really don't need him. N again does more of the heavy lifting in the antagonist zone, and while Ghetsis is made out to be the typical JRPG villain, I don't find his involvement that impactful aside from him raising N with his ideals. Ghetsis still steals the show in every moment, don't get me wrong, making sure that there is someone to lock our sights on and be careful about should we ever have to fight him, which we do as the standard final boss and all. Where afterwards he dips out raising a fist in the air like he just doesn't care, saying that one day he will make his return, but I don't think that all really mattered much because again, Ghetsis wasn't fully invested as a character as N was throughout the story. I remember a few years back when Some Call Me Johnny made his review on these games and him making a comment about how these games are called Black and White, not so much as a callback to Red and Blue, but because of the themes they were driving home. And in some ways, he was right about how the themes play themselves in a sort of duality, where for every instance we see the people of Unova wanting to build their lives and relationships with Pokemon, Team Plasma and N says nuts to the idea. Or how Ghetsis wants to show up all mean-spirited and suggests that Pokemon should be slaves in his goals of conquest, and ironically we're stopping that from happening by someone aligning with N's goals towards the end. It's all very RPG-like, and that's what I love personally the most about Generation 5's story, especially now as an adult when you're replaying these games, as you're able to digest these ideas and concepts a hell of a lot easier. This is probably one of my longest synopses for a Pokemon story yet, but it goes without saying that it's because of how much time and dedication this story got. Again, with N, it's nice to see that there's more of a driving force with the end goal of beating the big bad. And while we can argue if we need a Ghetsis or not in the end, I still prefer that we got the ultimate big bad that was doing everything from behind the scenes, regardless of how I feel about him. Though at the end of the day, this is still a Pokemon game, and whether or not we can stand here and talk about the morals of a walking Christmas tree is up to you. I'm sure there are plenty of video essays on that topic alone. Traveling again through the Unova region really was a highlight for me. It's much linear compared to before, as you really are going in one direction for most of the time spent during the usual routine Pokemon experience. Your journey for the main story is going through the west side of Unova, where you'll be meeting all kinds of people to throw hands with and locations that truly show the epitome of the DS's capabilities. As I said before already, Gen 5 shows what the DS hardware can achieve, and the routes and cities highlight these points as you breeze on by. This in turn also makes the impact on the gameplay all the more enjoyable, as there's nothing static about where you're going or what you're doing, since there is always something to do throughout most of your time playing. One thing I will say mechanically speaking that I really enjoyed was the usage of the TMs and HMs, as these were massively reworked for this generation. The HMs for one, well, they're barely a thing for story progression here, which thank God, because that meant not having too many HM exclusive Pokemon as secondary party members. With a total of 6 HMs, where really you'll only be needing 3 to progress through the main story, this is a blessing in disguise. Like I said in the previous generations, I was not a fan of the overabundance of HMs despite my tolerance of them, and here I am glad that there are barely any instances that require me to use them unless it's like for side content stuff. This does make the journey slightly faster because of this lack of back and forth, but considering how heavy in story this game already is, it's good to see this corner be cut or rather refined so it's not so much of a tedious slogfest to beat the game. And with the TMs, well, here's the thing with them, you now have unlimited use for them, and that's just great. I love it. I no longer have to worry about which Pokemon needs which TMs, as now I can override as many moves as I want and mess around with my playing style with certain Pokemon on my team. It made things easier, and that also meant not having to worry about building a strict moveset, though of course why would you, since these games aren't really that competitive based. Another cool thing about this generation are the seasons, where for every 4 months it changes with the season it's based upon in real life. This meant higher chances of catching certain Pokemon that would not appear under different circumstances, like say, you know, more ice types in the winter season and perhaps more grass types in the spring or summer seasons. But since this is based on the real world, much like the day and night cycle, if you wanted a Pokemon but couldn't find it in one season, well, best of luck waiting a quarter of a year to get a higher chance. I stuck with the summertime by default because, let's face it, I didn't want to manipulate the time, and the summertime kind of looked rather nice. You also have a more dynamic approach to the EXP system, as depending on how far your level gap gap is you gain more or less EXP in each encounter. What this means really is that if you have a weaker Pokemon fighting and winning against a stronger one, then they gain extra EXP, making grinding a hell of a lot easier. And this holds true even with certain Pokemon that you encounter in the wild, like Aldino, who is just the epitome of EXP grinding. Seriously, if you see an Aldino, that means you're getting a whole lot of EXP no matter what level gap you have. Now, for why this is even a thing, I don't know, but that made leveling up easier and not so much of a chore unlike before. Thank you for your services, Aldino, though you're ready to catch these hands. You got your usual stuff like the dowsing machine making a return, the Wi-Fi connections being relegated to the C gear at the bottom of the screen, and even the Dream World gimmick this game introduces. I can't talk about these mechanics too much nowadays, and from what I even remembered about them as a kid, I don't think I even used them properly either. But from what I do remember, because of the way Pokemon Gen 5's cartridges were built with an infrared feature on them, this made trading and battling with friends easier without having to go to the Pokemon Center. Largely due to the popularity of the Pokewalker and how it connected with the Heart Gold Soul Silver, no doubt, but I like to look back and see just how streamlined everything was back in the day. It's definitely a relic of the past here, especially since we now live in a world where we much have easier access to transferring and exchanging Pokemon with one another, as well as doing a bunch of other online stuff in the newer Pokemon games. That said, not much comes to mind in terms of new content for this generation, but I will say that the battle system in these games is so incredibly stimulating. Pokemon battles never looked this good in 2D, as sprite works are massively improved with their front and back being fully animated. I love this so much because there's a sense of life in these battles now paired with better move animations that makes me enjoy them. And they're so much faster now too, God bless. Everything in the battling system is sped up now, from health bars, taking damage, and selecting moves. Literally everything is ramped up to really bring a sense of kinetic energy that wasn't there previously. Hell, while we're on the subject of animation, I even love how they made the evolution sequence because it legit reminds me of Digimon. You got your usual singles and occasional double battles, but introduced in this game are the triple and rotation battles. Depending on which version you end up picking, you'll see more of, and in my case, Pokemon Black had the rotation battles, which suck ass. I hate it. It's a triple battle style where you rotate your Pokemon left and right and have to gamble with the other trainer to see which Pokemon they're gonna be rotating to. So if you have shit RNG luck like me here, these are gonna be an absolute nightmare. Thankfully, they're not so prevalent, and as long as you avoid this one particular house in Opalescent City, you'll be good to go in my book, but fuck man, glad they removed these in later generations. As I look back on my journey for this game, I can't help but notice how much I enjoyed the music for this one. I know in the previous games I barely looked at the soundtrack, and I did emphasize this earlier in the video, and it's not to say that I didn't enjoy them. I certainly enjoyed Gen 4's, but Gen 5 really showcased the atmosphere of the Unova region. Never did I appreciate a soundtrack as this one, where so many wonderful tracks hit home, making for some iconic beats to listen to. From, again, the gym leader battles and their final Pokemon standoff, as I expressed earlier, to the cities having these grandiose and vibrant themes to them, it's really fun exploring through Unova because the music definitely adds to that. I mean, take a listen to Driftvale City's theme and you'll see what I mean, man. One thing I will admit looking back at Gen 5 Part 1 that I didn't find too much enjoyment out of was the limited roster. In an era where we now have 1,000 of these creatures, it feels weird to see a set of 150 exclusive Pokemon here. In hindsight, I guess this is a dumb take since we can always pop back the newer games and enjoy the roster they have in those, I think. But compared to what I said about Platinum's roster and how complete that one felt in my eyes, this one didn't hit me nearly as hard. Still, I admire the attempt to give us a whole set of new Pokemon to use, and I wasn't as bored seeing some repeats because I like how well designed the Pokemon are in this generation. From raccoons like Patrats and Watchhogs giving you the meanest of looks, a big ass dog with a mustache on his face, some mushrooms that question my maturity, an electric zebra, a mole that turned itself into a drill, biblically accurate angels, and some floating ice cream cones. I low-key love how different these designs can be, but they sure as hell made it hard for me to get a proper team going. So here's the thing about my Pokemon team for this game. I honestly did not know what the hell I even wanted. Because of the limited roster, that meant that I had to start sending out friend requests left and right and hopefully get a new set of buddies to join on my travels. Starting with my, well, starter, I went ahead and chose Tepig as I said because when it evolves, its final evolution is an Emboar, which is a fire-fighting dual type that Pokemon had some sort of an extreme fetish for back then. I mean, look back at both Gen 3 and Gen 4 with Infernape Tornape and Blaziken, and you can see that there was a preference when it came down to fire types, but hey, if it works, it works, and my M-board here really proved it. My second party member was a Watchog, which I don't remember using back then, but goddamn, what an overlooked Pokemon if you ask me. A straight normal type, sure, but he really had a simple but effective moveset with Work Up, Crunch, and Dig being my most used moves on him. He was mainly my deterrent for Ghost type Pokemon because they're immune to them and really helped out against Chantal, the Ghost type Elite Four near the end. Seriously, don't mess with a Watchog, and I like to see my buddy Waddy here with his black glasses just vibing us up hip hop before throwing it down in the streets of Castalia. Like in my Platinum review, I went ahead and got a fossil Pokemon for my team, which was a Tortuga that evolved into another favorite fossil Pokemon of mine, Caracosta. A rock water type that helped out with flying, ground, fire, and steel types. This ancient turtle did numbers, but I hated how slow he was though. Thank God I had a Quick Claw though, and you know, he made up for it with his high defense and attack stats. Besides these three, the others were just confusing to me because it was a constant flip-flop on who to have next. At first I had a Pansage, which was a gift Pokemon you get earlier on in the Dream Yard, and I was like, okay, you know, yeah, I could get Simisage again, which is a pretty cool Pokemon. But then when I was roaming around Pinwheel Forest and encountered Burke, one of the gym leaders, I remember that he had a Lavani on his team, which made me reconsider the Grass Monkey. And so I scoured through that forest to get a Sawaddle so I could evolve it into one to serve as my grass type, and I couldn't be more happier about it. Another Pokemon I caught earlier in the adventure was a Woobat as my flying type, and while I evolved into a Swoobat, it wasn't until later on I found myself in Emolga that immediately made me switch Pokemon. I guess it was because it was a Pikachu clone of this game or something, I don't know, you know, I never really used one either, and it's one thing that I learned in my Emerald review is that you don't fuck around with the cute and cuddly kind. Again, a shame that I switched it out with my Swoobat, but I like to consider that she had an early retirement of sorts after being Skyline, wanted to pass the baton along before chilling in Mistralton City. I like to think so anyways. As for my final Pokemon, god, this one was all over the place. I wanted an Ice type first of all, but I wasn't a fan of the ice cream cones and the weird Aku Aku mask, which meant a Cupchew was my only option. But then learning about how extremely rare it is in the summer season, and again, I didn't want to manipulate the time, I moved on to a Dragon type, which was originally a Drudigon and then later on a Haxorus. Can you tell I was very indecisive? Because of this non-stop back and forth, by the time I got to the Pokemon League, I ended up just giving Reshiram that 6th Pokemon slot. Yeah, I'm one of those who doesn't like having a legendary on my team, but I mean, what else was I going to do? At the very least, it made up for a really cool moment when you go 101 with N and his legendary, so for visual flair, I wanted to mimic that iconic moment. But after that, to the PC box it went, and I got my Lucario in post-game to fill the void. Welcome back, Ryu. I sure missed you, buddy. As for post-game, well, I legit enjoyed what they did here. After beating the main story and seeing N dip out into parts unknown, we are back in Nuevema town for the usual national Pokedex upgrade and all, but now it's time to explore the east side of Unova. Complete uncharted territory, despite being only 3 cities and routes, I enjoyed the additional stuff they had on top of these new locations. You know, looking back at these places, I really enjoy re-exploring them because I honestly didn't remember that much about them. The only one that came into mind was White Forest and Pokemon White version, and I was a bit disappointed to experience Black City for the first time because it was so lacking. I later learned that that's because in order to populate the damn city, you have to use the extra link feature with friends and have this sort of Animal Crossing like recruitment system in order to get people to visit and live in your city or village. Not really doing this in 2024, but hopefully in Black 2 White 2 this isn't a thing so I can appreciate the view a little more. Laganusa town was comfy moving around in the bunch, though there was nothing much to do since all the houses were empty when I entered them. Like, what the hell? Made me feel uncomfortable because I headed back outside and started to think that these were ghosts or something, especially after that random ass encounter with a girl in the Marvelous Bridge. Yeah, this side of Unova is whack. Village Bridge was a village, well, on a bridge. Plain and simple, what more can I say? And there's Undella Town, and its tropical beats and patterns sure got a kick visiting this one. The hell was that? What the? Alright, let me see what's up with this place.
Oh no!
Oh god, oh god, oh god, no, no! Let me out, let me out, let me out, let me out! Yeah, that's right, folks. A secret Cynthia boss fight, and goddamn! As if she wasn't terrifying already, now it just seems she's out to get your ass for last time. At least I was aware and managed to get the team ready to counter her after like 3 attempts, and she was an optional battle, once per day I think, but man, this was definitely a jump scare. Shout out to my homeboy Scrafty for delaying the inevitable with a sand attack. You truly are a goat. In fact, now that I mention it, I was shocked to see the sudden ass level gap in the new new routes in post-game because I was in the mid-50s for the first Elite Four run and N, but now these guys are in their mid-60s to low 70s. Guys, I get the urge for difficulty, but this is like Johto levels of level gapping. You don't do that to a person. The Elite Four rematches were something else here, man. The first time I've done this, by the way, but at the same time, it was kind of fun and challenging. It kept me going, and if a game does that for me, you know, it feels rewarding after beating it. Aside from these locales and the epitome of battle PTSD, Cynthia wasn't the only one making a return for post-game, as Detective Looker also makes a return as well. After the whole Ghetsis incident, Looker is out in Unova in search of the remaining 7 sages, and asks for your help to locate them as they are hidden somewhere in certain areas within the region. So it's a scavenger hunt to the same places you visited the first time, except with a full arsenal of HMs at your disposal. This is something I absolutely had the most enjoyment out of. To see where else I can go from a place I already visited in the main story sounds pretty exciting, and it definitely brings more world building to Unova than any other region. Finding the sages also brings more depths to Ghetsis' background and why he wanted to do the things he did during the main story, and I also found that to be pretty cool since it supplemented what was already so well written. I still had a guide with me to make things easier though, because let's be real, I'm not running blind on this. Listen, I can't stress this enough, but I have to cover part 2 soon. Like, I gotta get a move on here. Instead of the battle frontier, we now have the battle subway. Yeah, a subway. Don't ask me how it works, it just does. It's similar to the battle frontier, where it's more battling content for those that are interested, but unlike the previous games, I actually wanted to try this one out. Surprisingly, I wasn't battle fatigued, and largely because of the animations and gameplay being much faster, as I said, and so I took a few turns with the battle subway and, you know, really enjoyed my time. Again, I'm not a competitive freak, but maybe on my off time I'll dive into this some more. But like any other post-game content, it's time to find the legendaries, and I'm glad to see a nice variety here too. With the exception of the box legendary, you got the Swords of Justice trio, which for a set of legendaries, that's a pretty badass name. They're a bit under-leveled, and you can actually find them earlier on in the main story. You have Cobalion, Terrakion, and Virizion, which no, I'm not gonna be making the Verizon joke here. They're solid enough encounters in the typical trio you find like in previous generations, but their designs are definitely some of the coolest I've seen of them, notwithstanding the ones from Johto. Now that I think about it, maybe that's why these guys were the ones to get Paradox forms to Generation 9. Then you got Kyurem in the Giant Chasm, who is just standing there by his lonesome. Not as important as he will be in the sequels to follow, but another fun encounter I had nonetheless. The ones I did not bother at all to find were the Roman legendaries of this game, Tornadus and Thunderous, each respective in their own versions. Listen, my patience ran very thin the last time with Platinum, and even if it's just one here, I won't be running around to find the damn thing. Okay, maybe off screen, but we'll see about that. Besides that, my time with Pokemon Generation 5 was a solid one, but I wouldn't call it a perfect 2D Pokemon experience. Considering we have sequels to cover, I believe it's not fair to say that part 1 is the better one when arguably there are things I find better in the other games that we will talk more about when we get there. And with my bias on Platinum as hard as it is already, I personally think Gen 5 Part 1 is slightly above Gen 4 in terms of overall experience for me, especially considering the fact that I grew up with these 2 generations. As much as I said that I think Platinum should be your starting point for a Pokemon adventure, I wouldn't be lying if I said Pokemon Black and White would be a good start as well. It has the better story and plot points that keeps the adventure going, the rivals are fun and engaging in their own ways, making for some interesting characters along the way, the battle system is massively improved and more dynamic than ever before, and you got a brand new set of Pokemon buddies to collect and make good memories with. It's honest to God and great time overall. You know, it's pretty crazy, just the more we cover each and every generation, there's a lot to talk about in each of them and whatnot, and I try my best to sort of oversimplify as much as I know, and you guys are probably just gonna say otherwise in the comments and blah 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 and all that kind of stuff, but it's still insane just how far we've gotten to this point, and we're now going to be covering Pokemon Black 2 and White 2, which are going to be the last ones for me to cover for this mainline review marathon. In terms of Pokemon content in the future, there is plans of maybe Pokemon Unite for its 3rd anniversary or whatever, or maybe the Mystery Dungeon games, or I don't know, just anything Pokemon is gonna wait a while because Black 2 and White 2 are gonna be the last ones for the mainline series, that is, because I'm kinda, you know, losing my mind with Pokemon here, and I want to talk about other games that are out there too. But rest assured, Pokemon Black and White 2 are going to be the last ones to cover. That's going to be next on the docket, and from there, we'll see what else we can cover down the line. But as always, thank you guys so much for watching. I love you all to 120 as always. Stay safe and sexy out there. Do good into the world. Peace out, and take care. Oh, my back. God damn. Oh, I love Pokemon with all my heart and whatnot, but god damn it, man. I can't wait for this review marathon to be over. I really need to talk about some other franchise out there. I don't know. Hollow Knight, Okami, friggin' Xenoblade maybe? I don't know. God.